Okay, thank you so much. So we'll go ahead and get started at 6 o'clock. Um, so first of all, thank you everyone and welcome. Thanks for joining us this evening. This is our public information meeting. And this is hosted by Development Coordination. We're going to ask if you're not speaking, if you could please mute yourself. Thank you. So there are a couple of items that I'd just like to review before we get started. One, please note that we are recording this meeting. And next, as I mentioned, if you're not speaking, if you could please mute yourself, and that way we can hear others speaking, and we can also hear the presenters. Also, if you have any questions, we ask that you raise your hand. You'll see the hand button at the bottom of the screen. We have placed also the staff's contact information in the chat box. So after the meeting, if you have additional questions or if you have comments, feel free to contact any of the staff members, and we're happy to assist you. Also, we're going to allow time for questions and comments during the presentation. So as each code section is presented, any proposed changes, we will allow time for the public to ask questions, just so you know. So there will be that time allowed in between each one presented. So what we'll do is start with staff introductions. So I am LaShawn Dock. I'm zoning supervisor. I work in development coordination, and I have my boss on the line, Eric Cotton. Eric is the development coordination manager. And we also have on the line with us Matt Pleasant. He's with City Planning. Matt, if you're there, if you can turn on real quick just to say hi to everyone. Matt is Senior Planning Coordinator.
Hey everyone, great turnout, and I look forward to hearing the discussion today.
All right, thank you. And so what we'll do is we'll go ahead with that and get started. I'm going to share my screen and bring up the presentation, and we'll start with Eric presenting the publicly initiated text amendments, and then he'll turn it over, and then I'll introduce the privately initiated amendments, and then we'll have the applicants give their presentations. We'll go in that order. So let me go ahead and switch this around. I hope everyone now can see the presentation. And Eric, take it
Good
away.
evening, everyone. Again, Eric Cotton, Development Coordination Office. These are the public initiated text amendments for the July 2022 cycle. These were workshopped, just for some background, these were workshopped at City Council. For the most part, on the 23rd of June, we did a quick follow-up, primarily by memo on September 15th. This goes to City Council as a workshop item next Thursday on the 27th. And it goes to the Planning Commission on the 7th for their actual public hearing on consistency and findings and such. The changes that are in here are results of primarily issues that we've seen arise at the staff level over the past couple of years that we're trying to address, to, in a sense, sometimes limit the need for a PD, which you'll see it later on at like an item number 5. That's a typical PD process, or processes that go before council on a somewhat regular basis that previously were allowed by code, but changes were made. So I'll just go ahead and get started on that with the first one, which is the design exception language. Oh, just resource. So as most of you are aware, design exception ones don't require notice. That's what the request is for. And we use a design exception for a lot of different things in our office, ranging anywhere from a setback reduction to alternative parking if you're basically doing a long-term lease to have off-site parking on another piece of property. That's all part of the design exception process. What this request is for from our side, this is initiated by staff, is when somebody's doing a setback request in Seminole Heights or in East or West Tampa, it does not require notice. This is a requirement that would start requiring notice, like a design exception 2, which is the process used elsewhere in the city, like you would in South Tampa or North Tampa or wherever else that would be. But this would now move like Seminole Heights and West and East Tampa that we don't require a notice for their administrative waivers and setback to require notice. Same notice that's required elsewhere in the city, the 250 feet, and a sign posting. I guess I'll ask for questions if anybody has anything. I guess raise your hand or however that's working. I don't know how to recognize people. I hate to say it on this. I see.
I don't know how to raise my hand, but I have a question.
Okay, I don't know who's speaking, but that's good.
My name is Carolyn White.
Oh, I see up there. Okay.
Okay. The question is, are you talking about people can build on property lines? Or right next to a property line when you're talking about a setback?
Right. So setbacks, just for edification purposes, a setback is the distance that's required by code from the property line back to where the structure sits.
And is
for
that being
instance-
changed?
Pardon?
And you're saying that this is being changed? It's
No,
being
no,
changed?
What you can do through a process, whether it be before the variance review board or as an administrative design exception, is reduce your setback requirements. In East and West Tampa and in Seminole Heights, that's done administratively through a design exception. That process does not require notice. What this request is doing, what this text amendment would be doing, would be requiring those people who are asking for those kinds of waivers to provide notice to the adjacent property owners. Like right now, a variance and a design exception 2 are everything within 250 feet and you post a sign, it would be that same requirement. That's not required right now for those kind of reductions.
Is this for things that are going to be built or things that are already built?
Ideally, people pull permits, and when they go to get a permit, that's actually, if they're noticed at that time that hey, you have to get a variance, you don't meet the required 7 foot, 5 foot, 20, whatever it happens to be. At times, if people do work without permits, it would be the same issue. They would have to come in and go through the same process just after the fact. So it could be constructed without permits. When they get cited by code enforcement or the building department, they would still have to come in and get a variance for that request, or in this case, a design exception.
Mr. Cotton, I'm going to call you because I have someone who's built before I moved here, and it wasn't the people that live there. They're right on the property line. So I'll have to call you personally and talk with you about that. This is my biggest concern. I mean, their eaves are hanging over my fence line. And it's been there for years, and I don't want, to be a problem here, but that's something I'm really concerned about.
Okay.
Okay.
We can follow up.
But I will call you myself. Okay, thank you.
Okay, sounds good.
We have Karen Romo.
Karen, do you have a question, or are you just not muted? Nope.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. I was wondering if Riverside Heights is included. You keep mentioning Seminole Heights and East Tampa and West Tampa.
Riverside Heights right now needs to seek either design exception 2 or a variance. They're not subject to the design exception 1 process.
No, what I'm wondering, are they going to be included in this ADU?
We haven't gone to that. We haven't gone to that part of the, right now we're just at the item number 1, which is the
Okay.
alternative design exception requirements.
Okay. Sorry.
We'll get there, don't worry.
And Susan raised her hand.
The way I read the actual draft, it looks like it's crossing out both design or the design exceptions too in general. So, which are defined as setback and height limitations, but then it's just specifying in G setback reductions and not height.
That can be fixed. That's probably an oversight when we were drafting this up. So I'm going to look down, I'm going to write, so when you see the top of my bald spot, I apologize. So we're striking the two from the letter, the number two, because all design exceptions that are asking for setbacks, and now like Susan Swift just pointed out, the height issue, that would both be addressed through that. So either way, the renotice would have to be required, which is not required now.
And then my other question is just above that, why is E being eliminated?
It's not, that's not part of it's in the draft, but that's not part of the changes at this point. That won't be affected by this text amendment.
Okay. Is that in a future text amendment?
We have to have a comprehensive look at the design exception criteria for basically what everybody's looking at on the code is 2765 A through F. The legal department, city legal, and I've had conversations about going back and looking at this language to try to come up with trying to come up with different language that we would be able to be applied for stuff. At this point, that language isn't changing, just G in that section.
But I'll just make an editorial comment that I don't see why we have these for setback and height limitations, because that's what the variance review board is for. So to me, it gets around it.
Understood.
Okay, we have Debbie. Debbie Z.
Debbie, if you're speaking, you're muted. Oh, she is.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, you can hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I can't, oh, sorry, I hung up on my phone. Can I come back in 2 minutes because it's not coming on my computer? I'll call back in 1 minute. Sorry.
Okay, we have Alvin, who had his hands raised.
You're muted. You're muted. Still muted.
What's the access code? Can you,
There we go. Okay. There
Okay,
we go. Can you hear me?
yes, sir.
All right. All right. So Alvin Williams, E-Building Concepts, and thank you for taking the time to have this meeting. And so I guess I came in a little late, so I'm not quite sure how you started it out, Eric. But I knew I had to be here and ask this question. So of course, everybody knows what we're going through right now in Port Charlotte after the hurricanes. And I have been advocating for the last 5 years on trying to get a different way of building, different types of building, and just all around trying to help out with the affordable housing crisis that we have in this nation. And I am proud to say currently I am working on one of the only 3D printers to 3D print houses here in Tampa, Florida. I've been working on this for the last 5 years now and talking to from the mayor on down. And I've gotten a lot of opposition saying basically we don't need any housing from the very beginning 5 years ago. We don't need any more housing. And this problem that we've been having, we're 7 million homes behind right now in this country of catching up with affordable housing. So number one, is this ADU loophole or whatever we're trying to do here, is this leading to what I know a lot of people are trying to talk about is tiny homes? Is this some kind of way of trying to try this out and see if this works? And number two, why only just in Seminole Heights and Lowry Park area? Why isn't, because there's a housing crisis all over the state of Florida. So why are we only trying this out just in these 2 spots? So I guess that's my second question. So,
Okay, well, we haven't started talking about the ADUs yet.
Hmm.
We're talking about alternative design standards.
okay, okay.
ADUs are coming in like number 6 on the agenda.
Oh, okay. I
We'll get to
apologize.
some of that in half an hour, maybe,
Okay.
and how quickly you go through these.
So would the 3D printing fit under the first part you had said as far as alternative? 'Cause
Alternative
3D
designs
printing-
have to do with setback and height bulk kind of issues, not construction type.
variances and things.
Yeah.
Got you.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. I apologize. I jumped the gun on that.
No issues.
Yeah. So this agenda, is this something that I should have gotten an email before the meeting or something that you say you're following as far as
I don't know if it was sent out or not. I honestly don't know if it was sent out or not. It was, so the first slide we had on there, but it may have been before you signed in and everything.
Oh, okay.
It's going, there's an order in which we're going through the different text amendments.
Okay, gotcha.
So we'll get to it.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it.
And you're welcome.
And Debbie, are you back on?
And Matt, you're
Did Debbie
muted.
make it back online?
Here she is. She's back. Can you hear us, Debbie?
She's not speaking. Let's see, or we can't hear her.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Sorry about that. I'm kind of got a bad technology here. Here's my issue with regards to the administrative variances. We're hearing a lot of issues with regards to, wait, I have to, sorry, I'm just going to, we're having issues with regards to administrative variances being used in areas that we don't think they apply. For instance, on Adelia, there's a 30-car robotic parking garage with a 2-unit apartment complex. And then we're also seeing these design exceptions being used when someone's had a PD, it's not moving forward the way they want to see it move forward, and they're going in with a design exception 1 and a special use 1. So it's kind of creating a workaround within the code with the design exceptions. What I would put out there for consideration is maybe the design exceptions should really be put on hold until we have some checks and balances to make sure that what's being approved through these are actually in conformity with the intent of the code. And if there is something that is kind of out of whack, right now there's really very little way to address it, and particularly with the design exception 1, because it requires no notice. So thank you so much, Eric.
You're welcome. Well, as I was stating, the design, I don't know if anybody from legal is on here tonight. I don't know if Susan was able to sign in or not, but I mean, the code is a code right now. And I know Debbie and I have had the conversations. I don't know if I've probably spoken to Carolyn Bennett and Stephanie Pointer about some of this stuff in the past. What this is basically trying to address right now is just requiring notice for people who are coming in for setback reductions. Something that's not required right now in the code. So for instance, if I had a house in Seminole Heights and I asked to reduce my side yard from 7 down to 5, if Debbie was my next door neighbor, she would have no idea that I had requested that, except either A, she saw it in the Tampa Cares newsletter, if she saw it on the interactive map we have, or when the construction team shows up and starts doing construction. So that's what we're trying to basically do. In those cases, people get notice. The other issues that Debbie's talked about, I talked to her a little bit yesterday about that. We understand where you're coming from. That's why when I was speaking earlier, legal and I are trying to have some conversations about changing the standards and changing the criteria to approve it as DE1. So that's coming down the pipe, just not in this text amendment. Anybody else have anything else, or y'all want to move to the next one up on the agenda? Okay, so let's go back to the presentation.
I've also put the agenda in the chat so that way everyone can see our next items that are coming ahead. So right now, Eric just reviewed item number 1, which was the alternative design exception. So we're going to go back and we'll jump into item number 2. So let me bring that back up on the screen.
So what's up on the screen right now is the allowance of single-family attached and multifamily residential, allowing those in commercial districts. So if you look at the old chapter 43, which was in effect from 56 to the late 80s, we had a more of a pyramid kind of scheme of zoning. So whatever was allowed in R1A was allowed in R2, whatever was allowed in R2 was allowed in R3, and went up the thing. So multifamily, which was like an R3, R3A zoning district, was allowed in what was back then the commercial district C1 and C2 by right. As in the current code, people either have to pursue a rezoning or they pursue a special use 1. This is an effort to allow people to construct by right in the commercial districts, residential single family attached or residential multifamily. That is a change in the code. Again, right now you have to go through the process either, like I said, either rezoning or special use. This would allow somebody to do that in those districts that are shown in the RO, RL1, OP, OP1, CN, CG, and CI, to do that by right without going through another process. This is again to allow, in an effort to allow more flexibility in people developing property within the city. Stephanie, oh, I just saw something in chat. I guess what happened to it? I don't know. I saw a question from Stephanie, put a question in there, but I don't know what happened.
I stopped
Oh.
because
On that
I have a serious concern about this because citywide, not every area of the city needs to be overrun with residential. And I think SOG is the perfect example. We don't have a grocery store. We are a food desert. We don't have a gas station west of Dale Mabry and south of Gandy. So when you start making these blanket assumptions that we should go with, oh, we can give away all of our commercial land. We've given away most of our commercial land and our IG and everything else. And so now we're stuck down here, a whole bunch of people who have no place to go to eat, no place to go to buy groceries, no place to go to buy gas. But yet this particular document right here means you're going to cram more 10 pounds more in a 5-pound bag without any commercial being added to our neighborhoods. I mean, not only that, we have 22,000 people a day who drive through to get to the economic engine down here. And I really have an issue with this. And I mean, I hadn't done a whole lot of homework on it, but I'm going to tell you right now, this should not apply to every single area of the city. How is it going to be in conflict with the new comp plan and the CHHA, where we're supposed to have no new density, but yet you want to give away our commercial properties in order for them to build more residential? Makes no sense. Just saying.
Okay, duly noted. I wrote it down. Anybody else have any comments on that stuff? I see Carol Ann put in there. Goes away. Maybe one up the chat. Basically, Carol Ann was mimicking what
I have a comment that's heavy. It's
I see Brian Seal wants to say
Eric,
something.
can you hear me?
Yes. I don't know who's speaking, but
Oh, Debbie Zommerman, I had a comment.
okay. Sorry.
Okay, with this one, I think probably you should take this one off the list until it's vetted further. You have a huge affordable housing crisis. As I recall, this is based on the future land use as potential for what could be built on those sites. You have the ability to continue building greater massing of buildings with less units, which means that you're just having fewer units, and the units that are being built are really big and really expensive. And the other thing is I have grave concerns about what this could do to our historic and kind of, well-used downtown business districts that are really the homes for a lot of our independent businesses that really we love. So I would respectfully request that this one be taken out of consideration because it deserves a whole lot more vetting than what's been done to date. Thanks again, Eric.
You're welcome. I thought Brian Steele had popped on too. Go ahead, Brian. If you're talking, you're muted. Still can't hear you, Brian. You're just giving up. Okay. Call me tomorrow. Anybody else have anything else they want to talk about on this one before we move on? No?
I think
Okay.
there's some other hands raised.
Oh, are there?
I thought there were people before me, but.
Oh.
Should I go?
Go ahead,
Karen
Yes.
and Susan.
Karen, go ahead, Karen.
If it's Karen Romo, I already asked my question. Sorry.
Okay. This is Susan. My question, it's not a question. I think this is a huge policy issue, a change in policy. And the comprehensive plan has different uses for different reasons, and this will upset the entire probably real estate market, and I'm not sure in good or bad ways, but essentially this will spread residential all over the city in places that perhaps it is not appropriate. And I don't know what number 3 means, because density always has to be consistent with the land use category. And then underlying zoning district, what does that mean? Because the zoning district is going to be the same. We're just allowing new uses in it. So, and actually some of the CG, I think, and some other districts, some of the setbacks are 0 in some cases. So I guess I'd go back to what some other people said. I think this is a comprehensive plan discussion. I think this is a huge change in the distribution of land uses across the city.
Okay.
Carolyn, do you have a question? Okay, so she's gone, and then
Yes, I
Karen.
do.
Okay, yes, go ahead.
Have you taken into consideration with all of this that you're wanting to do, putting homes and offices and commercial stuff, what this is going to do to our utilities? Have you thought about all of this kind of thing? I mean, when you start doing this, we've already got too much, as what I hear from everybody. We've already got a mass problem with our sewers and our watering and all of this, and now you're just going to add more to it without really taking into consideration what we have available. I'm really confused as to how we can take a business and then add homes to it when it's, I just don't know how it can be done. I'm really confused.
Well, I mean, all that takes place into consideration when somebody gets ready to develop a piece of property. Just somebody on the private side, they're coming in and say, I want to develop this lot. as part of their due diligence, they look to make sure that there's adequate capacity for roads, for sewer, for water, all that stuff's part of the building process that somebody goes through before they even come into the city and say, hey, I want to build this.
I understand that,
Yeah.
but we're already over capacity as it is. And where we're gonna get this, I guess, more taxes? This is, and since it has to do with, affordable, living and that sort of thing, I think that we're really pushing the limit here.
Okay. Again, just to reiterate, this is a public information workshop. Your comments will be incorporated by staff. And we do have a meeting, again, this goes to council next Thursday for further direction. And if council does not want to move forward with any of these things based on comments that they generate, as long as what we're receiving tonight, some of this stuff will not move forward off of past that comment. So, but that's neither here nor there at this point. We can just keep, if nobody else has any more comments on this, we can go to the next slide, which is the DDR process.
Eric, I
Erica,
have-
it's Debbie.
Go ahead, Deb.
I have a follow-up comment, if I may, please.
Sure.
Eric, this looks like it's just a way to not go through the process that's already occurred for certain developments. For instance, like 3003 Cypress, which had a PD kind of having a concept like this, and then went through the design exception 1 and the SU 1. This looks like a way that they're trying to, through the code, make it to where they get this as a matter of right. And it kind of appears, and I'm not saying that it is, that maybe development communities behind it so that they won't get blocked they got blocked on the PDs, they got blocked on the design exception 1s and the SU 1s. And now it's like, oh, we'll just sneak in a code change. And I'm not trying to make that accusation, but that's how it's perceived. And given the fact that this has just come out and is in front of city council next week, I absolutely do not believe this has been vetted enough. I think there'll be absolutely horrible consequences, and I would respectfully ask that this one not be presented to city council. And that's just my opinion.
Okay, I mean, this was discussed at council back in June, and again back in September. And for every one, I know the one you're referring to at 3003 Cypress, there's other ones that have come through that are for not on that same mass and scale, that do require people to go through. They want to build 4 townhomes in a commercial property. They have to go through that same process. They have to either go through a PD or a special use. So it's not just the ones that you hear about. There are other ones that do take place that go into the neighborhoods that are not, that are affected. But I understand where you're coming from on that. But this is not specific to 3003 Cypress. This was addressed. This is something that we've talked about previous to that development going through.
Okay, and also just to note, Brian put a comment in the chat, and Brian, we have your comments down from Tampa Heights, and so we have that on record also. And I'll move on to the next slide, Eric.
Sean, this is
On
Susan
item
again.
3.
I just had one question. Is the change to the deletion of 27-132 in this last one or the upcoming one? I'm confused where that one falls or where I should talk about it.
For which one? I'm sorry.
The deletion of the functional classification map, 27-132.
For the standards for development of single family and attached, that would go away. It would just drop back into as a permitted use. It would not be part of unless we added that kind of language into the specified uses. That was on
Right.
the 282 section. That whole section would go away because it would no longer be a special use. Was that your
Yeah.
question, Susan?
What do you mean it would go away? it looks like it's eliminating the requirement to be on the arterial and collector, and then later there's a requirement that says it could be within 150 feet of an arterial and collector. And at the same time, I think there's the mobility department is reviewing that and gathering input on that map. So it seems like, I guess my request would be, if this isn't pulled off, I would like to see a map showing all of the properties that would be affected if now you're allowing access or parking. Maybe I'm getting these two confused.
Well, the 282 is a whole separate section of the code. That's for non-residential development, not for residential development.
For non-residential development that would be within 150 feet of an arterial or collector?
Correct. That's number 5 on the agenda.
Okay, my apologies. Thank you.
Okay, so number 3, right now, probably for the past 5 or 6 years, when someone has come in to do a development in downtown, Water Street, for instance, AER, the Pendry when it comes through and all that kind of stuff, they're going through a process called a design district review. That is not codified right now. There was a process that was created in Acela, like I said, 5 or 6 years ago, but it's never been codified in the city's in Chapter 27. This section, the 27-181.2, is actually codifying those requirements of the design district, the district design review process. So that's what that code section is basically changing. It's new to the code. It's never been in there before. It's a whole new code section. Anyone have any questions on that one?
Karen has her hand raised. I don't know if it's for this section or not. Karen, do you have a question on item 3 for the DDR process?
Which Karen?
Oh, I'm sorry. That would help. Karen Romo.
That
Has
must
her
be,
hand
I
raised.
think I accidentally raised my hand a couple times by accident.
Got it.
earlier.
Okay. Thank
Sorry.
you. No problem. Stephanie Pointer has a question on the DDR.
Okay.
I just want to verify this is only for downtown.
Correct. It's strictly the CBD.
Okay. Strictly the CBD. Now, let me ask you this. I'm special, so sometimes I don't understand. I thought that sometimes the CRA kind of had their own set of rules and did that stuff anyway.
I don't know. The CRA is not a land use body.
Mm-hmm.
They're more for financial size, my understanding. This isn't part of Chapter 27.
Okay.
So this right now, if there was a code amendment, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago that eliminated the need for site plan review in downtown. So the CBD and CBD 1 and 2 have specific standards that you have to meet. You meet those requirements, you just move forward by going through the DDR, and you just get everything's reviewed at that point. So by the time you get into permitting your site plan portion, and it's specifically more than anything else, it affects height and all, but specifically what's at the pedestrian level is taken care of. But the height's limited by like the aviation authority. So if you want to go 700 feet, you can't, because a plane will hit you as it flies over downtown. So you can't go that tall.
Okay, so I just want to clarify this. So this takes the authority to review land use changes, etc., from city council and gives it to this design district review board?
It's already been codified in a sense. That's how it's been happening. It is not changing. This is only design criteria. The zoning is still rested. If somebody wants to rezone their property from CBD 1 to CBD 2, that still goes to city council. This is just saying these are your standards. This is most of the form-based codes that the city has, this is the truest form-based code we have. So this
Okay.
talks more about the design and all that stuff, not the underlying zoning, the underlying land use. That's not changing.
Okay, got you. Thank you.
You're welcome. So number 4 on the agenda. This, I know I've already received some feedback from Debbie, and I'm sure we'll hear some others on this one. This is a change that would allow developments that are doing single family attached. So a couple of months ago, or maybe almost a year ago, there was a privately initiated text amendment that changed the requirements for multifamily style townhome developments. They wouldn't have to meet certain criteria of the code, including having, if you have 100 by 200 lots, the only ones that would face the street right away would be the 2 first units that come in, their doors would face the street. Everybody else would have to go through a design exception because their doors can't face the public right of way. This is a change to basically codify what staff has been basically processing for as long as this has been in the code that I recall. So this is going back 15, 16 years. We basically generally approve these requests where you have longer lots where people want to develop some additional density by doing this style of development, but they can't without getting a design exception. This would basically amend the code to say, yes, you're allowed to do the courtyards, but instead of having to go through an additional process of a design exception, this would just be allowing to do that by right. I don't know if there's a sketch on this one or not. I think on the next slide, there's a sketch of an example. So this is an example of what we routinely see. Now, this went before City Council on an appeal. This is in a CG zoning district. This is off of Horatio. This was denied by staff under the pretext of the previous text amendment we were talking about, which would allow this kind of thing by right. But if you notice, these homes, only the first 2 homes face the street, face Horatio, which is on the, as you're looking at the screen, the right-hand side. So this would amend the code to allow this development without having to go through a design exception. So people who have the deeper lots that want to do multifamily instead of going for single family attached, without having to go that extra step of the design exception process to go ahead and develop this kind of development like it's shown on this drawing. So any questions on this one?
Yes, this is Debbie. I think my hand's raised.
Yes,
Okay, honestly, Debbie, I can't tell. All I see is little boxes with people.
Okay, sorry. I think this one is just additional deal creep with regards to these attached single-family homes. What this will allow is the front yards to face the side, which you have never allowed before. And what if this building or this attached single family is next door to it could have 2 single-family homes on either side of it, one facing either side of the street, and all of a sudden they might have 12 houses with a front door 7 feet from the property line, and the side of their house is the last active side. A lot of times it has bedroom windows. This is not the side of the lot that you would expect a lot of activity. And you just changed the multifamily code within the last few months with that PETA. I think it's time to just stop changing this, let everything settle down, and not continue processing these, because even when you changed the code the last time, it was so you wouldn't have to do any more exceptions. Well, now they're just doing a different exception. So again, I'd say this is premature to have this one out there with City Council. And thank you so much.
Okay. Any other comments?
Karen Romo. Unless she still just has her hand raised. And then there's Stephanie Pointer.
Andy's behind me. So here's the problem with this. all those people, and we'll look at this drawing and we'll call it an west-east drawing. But the people who live to the north and south of that deserve to, my big issue with this is that this isn't a 2-story dwelling. These end up being 30 and 35 feet high because everybody wants to get as much square footage as they can. So they put the garage in the bottom, and then they put a first story, and then they put a second story, and then they got a third story, and then you've got a single family bungalow next door. And so what ends up with is you have a monstrosity. And you know what? This is not just a South Tampa thing. If you drive up, what is it, North Boulevard in Seminole Heights and Tampa Heights, these monstrosities are looking into people's bedrooms. I mean, they don't have any privacy. And I have seen at city council on multiple occasions where the council really has to take a spanking for the nonsense of, and oh, by the way, as my friend Debbie would point out, they want to put something on the roof. And so we end up with what we have off the side of the Selman Expressway, about halfway down, where you've got basically a 4-story building with roof access. And then you've got a bungalow, 1-story bungalow next to it. No, I mean, I'm all for multifamily housing, but we don't, if you're going to build it 2 stories high, fine. But when you're going to build it 3 stories high and then put a rooftop on top of it, no. Thank you.
So just as an explanation on this specific case, what's next to this one is a 7-story, I think a 5 or 6 story ALF. And on the other side was an apartment building. That's just for this specific case, just so y'all know where this is situated at. This
And
was
in
on,
that specific case, it may be appropriate.
right, and
But
that's
the problem is that if you change the rules, there's no asking. You just do it. Sorry.
no, I understand.
Okay, Sandy Sanchez.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay. We have the prospect of having one of these put into our neighborhood. And I have a couple of issues with it. Number one, nobody's paying attention to the size of the garages. Not to bring up 3003 West Cypress, but those garages maybe take too many Coopers, but nobody cares, okay? That's how narrow those garages are. On very small cars, you can't get 2 SUVs in them. Nobody pays attention to the size of the garages. So what's going to happen? Look at the layout. You got 4 auxiliary parking in the back. You've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, possibly 10 cars. Not all of them are going to fit, and then you're going to expect them to jam into the back. The other thing that nobody pays attention to is the garbage disposals, the garbage cans. These people are going to have to bring their garbage cans all the way to that front street. And I'll be glad to show you an example of something that was consistent with the comprehensive plan and the staff reports. And now we have trash cans all over the front of those places. People are parking up front because the garages are too small. They don't move their garbage cans. They use them as place setters for their cars, okay? And now one of these is a potential for going across the street. So you don't think it's disrupting the neighborhood, but it does disrupt the neighborhood. And with that, I was going to wait for this for later. There should be something that we can do when the city and all of the staff reports say it's consistent, and then becomes a disaster in our neighborhood. We should be able to point that out before a developer starts spending the money to put something like this in. I'm sorry, it just, those are the little things that you all have neglected because I don't think people bring it to you. We brought to your attention the fact that the driveways were too short. Now the fact is the garages are too small and you can't even get 2 SUVs in them. So if we're going to do something, let's look at it all, the whole picture. And let's just not look at, more unaffordable housing. Thank you.
Okay. Again, noted.
Carlos Ramirez.
Evening, guys. I guess I just have a quick question here. I know we're saying that these houses can face a courtyard. Do we have that defined somewhere, what a courtyard is, how wide it should be? Should it have landscaping, sidewalk, anything like that?
No, that's never been defined in our code. It's just been if they provide a private space for them, like, you know, when you walk out your door, you have your own area, whether it be delineated by a knee wall or by landscaping. That's what's been accepted as being a courtyard over the years by the city.
Okay, I just see the opportunity here for a developer to take advantage of that and either provide something substandard or something that may not be beneficial just to get more units in. But that's my comment.
Okay, I don't see anyone else with the question, with their hand raised. Okay, we'll go to the next.
So this is to 27-283.12. It applies only to non-residential access. Right now, when somebody wants to have access, if they're building a commercial use and they need access onto a local street, unless their access has been prohibited by FDOT, for instance, like along Florida or Kennedy or wherever, where FDOT said, no, you can't have access, then you automatically get access onto the local street. But sometimes for development purposes, you'll see, I'll use Publix as an example. Publix is going in, they front on a local street and they front on an arterial or collector. And they want to have access onto the local street for better in traffic flow inside. The only way to get that is to go to city council and ask for a plan development and ask for that waiver. Right now there's no administrative way to get to that point. So what this is actually requesting is to change the code. So just to allow that, as long as you meet those criteria, which is same criteria that's in Seminole Heights district, you're within 150 feet of an arterial collector where that entrance or exit's going to be, then you would have the ability to access onto the local street. That's what this change is for.
Okay, let's see who has their hand raised. Debbie Summerman.
If you're speaking, Debbie, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, you want a lot of feedback.
Okay, do you still have the feedback?
Yeah, but that's fine. You sound like you're in a canyon. You're echoing. But go ahead, Debbie. Well, we can hear you then.
How many of these requests have you received this year? And is it really that big of a deal just to do the administrative exceptions, just to make sure that you have the ability to review?
Well, it's as of right now, it's not processed as an administrative exception. It's not a DET or anything like that. It actually goes to city council on a rezoning as a PD. I believe the city planning section had pulled the numbers. I think it was for the fiscal year of 2021 or 2022. I guess we were just finished. I think it was a total of 7 times it showed up as a waiver on a PD.
Okay, so it was a waiver on a PD, but PDs have a lot of waivers. So
some of these
maybe if they're doing a PD and they still have other waivers other than this, I don't know that it's going to change the fact that you're going to have a PD with waivers.
But not every PD had other waivers. Sometimes a lot of PDs only have 1 waiver, maybe 2, and a lot of times the only 1 waiver was for this request. That's my understanding of what was pulled by city planning. So, that's just trying to eliminate that need to go through the PD just for this one issue. And maybe if they don't,
Well,
sometimes.
maybe it would be helpful if we had some statistics to actually know how often there's a PD with just this one issue that comes in. And maybe you bring up a really good point. Maybe there needs to be a lot more in-depth analysis of the PDs, what's being requested, so the public can know as well. And then we have a whole workshop on how to finesse the things that are coming up in PDs and make sure that we're not shooting ourselves in the foot just to have a quick fix that won't necessarily work.
Well, one of the goals that we're trying to approach this is having less PDs as a whole. That's where some of these changes are being proposed. If you look at a typical rezoning night, out of the 10 cases, a lot of times 8 or 9 of them are PDs. You very rarely see anybody come in with a Euclidean district. And some of that is because of the parts of the code that people ask waivers from. Not to say that this is a panacea for everything that comes through the city, but one of the goals of the administration, and I think I can't speak for city council, but one of the goals of the administration is to sit there and say, we want to go in and have changes to the code that will not require everybody that comes into the city to go through a PD rezoning. If you look at our zoning map, it's not, and somebody calls up and says, what's on this PD? It's not like it's a CG district. We can just say, oh, this is what you get. PD takes more staff time to look up and everything else. So, I mean, we understand where everybody's coming from. Like I said, I can give people copies of my notes if they want. I can scan this. Well, nobody will be able to read it, but I can scan it in and send it to people. But it is out there where we're trying to lessen up the code requirements that we see frequently come in, that generally speaking of council tends to waive those requirements. So it's like, in a sense, I have it in the code if it's constantly being waived.
May I make one last comment, please?
Just,
We've consistently been told that they're going to rewrite the code. The code needs to be rewritten. And one of the things that we hear fairly regularly at city council meetings is the developer has no other choice than to go in for a PD. We've been waiting for the code to be written. Right now, it seems like you've got a big dike, water comes out this way, you stick a finger in that way, and then you get 3 more holes somewhere else. What we really hear a lot in the community is it's time to stop making all these exceptions and let's just rewrite the code like everyone says we need to do. This is going to potentially be just another issue that creates problems. And once you make the change, you can't unring the bell because you're giving these development rights to someone who doesn't already have it. So if when you do go to write the code, this becomes problematic, it's already a right and you can't take it away. So that's kind of the big concern I have with all of these kind of overriding, is that once you get around to rewriting the code, you won't be able to write any specificity into it because you've given every opportunity for someone to build the biggest thing they can on a lot away by right with these small little changes that there's like 12 every 6 months. So, but thank you again, Eric.
You're welcome.
Okay, we have Sandy Sanchez.
I'm sorry, I meant to lower my hand.
Okay, thank you, Sandy. And we have Carlos Ramirez.
Yes, thank you. I guess the only concern I have with this change is having a driveway near an arterial that close. In engineering practice, we try not to have driveways that near a roadway because it can cause conflicts and backups. So that would be my only concern with this, is we need to make sure that we are following best practices when it comes to the transportation design in the area as well.
Okay.
Thank you.
And Susan.
I agree there are too many PDs. I'm wondering if there's a different way to do a minor modification for something like this that is not really requiring or shouldn't be requiring a whole process, and a whole revision of a site plan, which costs a lot of money, and takes a lot more time. So is there something much shorter, but will still allow public notice and public input? I guess we shouldn't be throwing the baby out with the bathwater on some of these that have a significant impact on residential areas, and in this case, residential street. I would be curious to see a map that showed 150 feet within arterials and collectors. I think even if we had more than 7, I think there are a lot more people who could be impacted negatively than a handful of PDs that need to go through this. But on the other hand, I agree, the process is extensive for some of the conditions that are being changed, and maybe there's a need to rethink some minor modification or add a new kind of modification process that doesn't require the whole dog and pony show.
Okay. We could work with mobility on some of that language, perhaps. I mean, we can circle back on that, tomorrow or Thursday, whichever. Well, tomorrow there's a bunch of meetings, but maybe Friday. So anybody else have questions on that one, or we want to go, I think, which everybody's been waiting for, the accessory dwelling unit issue. So we're going to move into the ADU. So this is like the next, probably 4 or 5 slides. So I'd rather run through these all at once because it's already 7 o'clock. I think we're on until 7:30, and then come back with the questions and concerns that y'all have or support, depending upon how this goes. First one is currently accessory dwelling units. They're special uses in 2 locations in the city. They're in Seminole Heights and they're out by Lowry Park, basically Lowry Park Central neighborhood. Seminole Heights was part of the Seminole Heights Code when that was adopted. The Lowry Park issue was a privately initiated text amendment like in 2004, 2005 timeframe. Checks for that neighborhood. Accessory dwelling units are, again, they're not defined in the code. This would actually define those. And it's just mimicking the language from the state of Florida, which has defined it as nothing more than a dwelling unit that serves as an accessory use to a principal use. That's the definition that has come forth on this stuff. The main things would be, well, okay, and that's just defining it. Now 27.132 is where the language currently sits for both accessory dwelling units and for extended family residences. Accessory dwelling units was going to come out of that. They're going to go into its own section under this proposal. But for extended family residences, one of the things that's in the code right now is you can't put an extended family residence, which is a house generally like a mother-in-law suite, where your elderly parent, your sister, your child who needs assistance or is in college, whatever, you want them out of the house, can live on your property. So you can have a full kitchen in those things, but they can't be rented, they can't be separately metered. But one of the requirements of the code is you can't put that in a non-conforming structure or a structure made conforming as a result of a variance. So what's happening is people will come out and they have an existing detached garage in their backyard. It's 2.5 feet from the property line in the rear, 3 feet side, so it meets the setbacks except for the rear yard. It's 2.5 feet. When they go through the special use process, we deny that request. They file a petition for review and they go to city council. And the time I've been doing this, so this has been about 4 years roughly, going to council on an appeal for a extended family residence, I think I've been upheld once. Other times they've always been overturned. And it's just saying, if you have that situation where you have an existing structure that was built, it's 2.5 feet from the property line, 2 feet from the property line, you want to put an extended family in there so your mom can live with you in the future, instead of getting denied administratively, you can get that approved as part of that special use process already, instead of going with that extra layer of a petition for review before city council. The other language we're talking about, and some of this is moving around in our code, it won't be under 132, would allow accessory dwelling units to be separately metered, which right now they're allowed, but not necessarily. The code doesn't allow accessory structures to be separately metered. The previous ZA allowed accessory dwelling units to be metered, so we're going to go ahead and codify that with the proposal. And this was a suggestion by one of the city council members when city planning was meeting with them one-on-one, which would allow to have up to 2 unrelated persons living in an accessory dwelling unit. By code right now, I think the assumption is accessory dwelling unit is only 1 person living in there. This will allow up to 2 people. Next slide, I guess, let's go to. So again, this is moving accessory dwelling units only from being a special use in Seminole Heights and in Lowry Park Central neighborhood to becoming a specified use under 27-282. So you don't have to go through the special use process anymore. So if you meet certain criteria that are going to be in the specified use language, then you can go ahead and build by right and develop the accessory dwelling unit. So the criteria, just so y'all know, it's similar to what's in the code now as a special use. 950 square feet maximum. The front unit has to be owner occupied. You can't have 2 rentals on the property. And you can't exceed more than 2 people unrelated in there. And it can be, again, I already said, separately metered. So those would be the criteria that would be under 27-282.30 specified uses if it's adopted by council. I guess let's do the next slide. So we had discussions with the planning commission and trying to develop where these would be the most appropriate place. Now there is some language that has in there about the CHHA, the coastal high hazard area, where it allows for an extended family residence, but does not allow for an accessory dwelling unit. So we're allowing these, where the proposal would be in just of the planning districts the city has in 3 of them, which is the Central Tampa Planning District, the West Shore District, and the University Planning District. South Tampa and New Tampa would be excluded at this point. That was some of the conversations that came out of when we were talking to the Planning Commission staff. Next slide, please. This would be to require parking. If you're doing an accessory dwelling unit less than 600 square feet, the code would require no parking. If you're doing above 600 square feet, then you would have to have parking. On the private property, if you're doing tandem parking, it's between the 2 different property owners. That's up to the the property owner and the person renting from them, how they maneuver their cars on their property. That's entirely up to those individuals. 27-290 talks about accessory structures. So right now the code limits the height to 15 feet. This proposal would allow an accessory structure to have an ADU built on top of it with the slide would allow you to build above the 15 feet, but not exceed the underlying zoning requirement, which is generally 35 feet in most of the residential districts. I would look at the code real quick because I'm confused over that second one. Bear with me one moment. So I know it's for the additional height. And the other thing we've talked about is under accessory structures right now, you get to be 15% of your lot size of the lot size requirement of the zoning district. So if you're zoned RS50, you're 5,000 square feet. So the biggest accessory structure you could have on your property is 750 square feet. That's what you would be allowed by code. This would allow somebody, if they have an RS50 lot and their lot's 10,000 square feet, they could build an accessory structure up to 1,500 square feet. Conversely, if they have a lot that's smaller, let's say it's 4750, it's in West Tampa, and they have one of those 90 or 50 by 95 lots, they would be limited 15% of that 4750, which I don't know how to do in my head, so I'm not going to venture a guess what that is. Probably around 690, maybe. So it would go both ways. If you're on a larger piece, you'd get a bigger property. If you're on a smaller piece, you get a smaller piece of property. I mean, you get a smaller accessory structure. And this would affect accessory structures with or without ADUs for this overall size. But if you're doing an ADU, then you could go taller than the 15 feet. I'm not sure what the next slide is. Oh, anybody? So
Next
that's
slide is West
yeah,
Tampa.
West Tampa. Okay. We could chat. Any questions, concerns about the accessory dwelling unit issue?
Debbie Zommerman has her hand raised. Debbie, if you can unmute to speak.
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
Eric, this is a huge change, and the areas of the city where you could have an accessory structure higher than 15 feet were traditionally our historic areas, which a lot of times had alleys behind them.
Mhm.
I personally live on Davis Island, and an accessory structure can be 3 feet from the back and the side of the property line. And when you start allowing a 35-foot accessory structure right behind the house, and you'll have lots of them, 1,500 square feet. And then we keep finding out that there's stuff that we think is included in the definition of the dwelling unit that it's not, like porches and things like that. All of a sudden you've got a 2,000 square foot structure. It's not housing anyone but Airbnb people. It's not addressing the housing need. Plus we're in a high coastal hazard area. There's evacuation concerns. I would request that you really think about not changing the accessory structure standards right now, and also seriously consider whether or not these are appropriate in high coastal hazard areas and flood prone areas, because with what we've just seen, it really could be problematic long term. And I can tell you there are a lot of people on Davis Island that didn't evacuate the last time. And I think it's something that really needs to be looked at correctly, because I think in our areas like Davis Island, it's going to be Airbnbs for people that are going to a Lightning game, a Bucks game, concert, and it's not going to be permanent housing for people who need it. I think there's probably a different way we could address that on Davis Island, particularly by not losing the naturally occurring missing middle that's in our community already to these detached or these attached single family homes. But again, that's just my opinion. Thank you again.
You're welcome.
Okay, Charlene has her hand raised.
Yeah, in reference to the units they're already existing right now in the Seminole Heights area. They're existing right now in the Laurie Park area. I don't think that and kind of in counter to what was just said about the issue of there becoming Airbnbs and not utilized for the purpose by which we would like to see as far as additional housing. I mean, it's working right now in Seminole Heights. It's working right now in the Laurie Park Zoo area. So to conclude that it's not going to work because you expand that footprint, I have to disagree with that. I think that it's a great idea given the direction Tampa is going right now. I think it's a great idea. My other part is I didn't quite understand the map, Eric, in terms of areas that's encompassed. Would that include the East Tampa CRA district?
I believe so. I think the University Planning District covers East Tampa.
The university. Okay, great.
Yes.
Okay, that was my other question, and thank you so very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, we have Teresa Wilson.
Thank you. First, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. First of all, I just want to say thank you so much. I think this is a fantastic idea. It's so needed. And as the previous person mentioned, it's already happening or being done. I live in VM Ybor. These units are all over the place. They're just kind of under the radar, and that's unfortunate. There is so much need. So I really applaud you for proposing this change. I do have a question just real quick. Would this include the Ybor area, or would there be issues with the historic district?
The historic district would throw another layer on top of it, but that's, again, the historic district is more for design and such. For, I believe
Okay.
Ybor actually falls under the central planning district. So it would be allowed there. Most of Ybor, except for the YC8, already allows for more than one unit on a piece of property anyway. Like YC2 allows for Sec 2 units and such. So it would really just affect the YC8 zoning. But I believe they're in the, I believe it's the central Tampa planning district. So that would fall in, Ybor would be part of this amendment.
Okay, that would be great, because like where we are, it's just single family. Question two, so would you, just sort of along this line, would you also allow like the dividing of a current single family home to create another unit, or would that fall outside of this?
It could come as an accessory dwelling unit because it could, I mean, traditionally there's detached structures.
Yeah.
But the code does recognize an accessory dwelling unit, much like an extended family resident, being part of the same structure, as long as it met the requirements of the code regarding the square footage and all, it could be done that way. So somebody could portion off a part of it, get permits, portion off of, let's say, a 700 square foot area for somebody to live in, and they can make it into a rental.
Okay. And one last question, and that is, could you have more than one ADU on a property, considering that, like, let's say the sum of the square footage didn't exceed that 15% of the square footage of the property?
That decision has not been reached yet. We've talked about it, but then the concern with that would be, if you have two that are 400 square feet, do they have to have the parking space because together they're above the 600? So we haven't, that decision has not been made yet.
So provided that they met the parking requirement, you know, other requirements, I would encourage you to consider allowing more than one ADU. Some of these lots, especially in VM Ybor, are really large. It could certainly accommodate more than one. So I'd just like to ask if that could be considered.
Okay.
And thanks for doing this. This is a great idea, and it will help so many people.
Okay, and we have Thomas with their hand raised.
Yes, so the definition of an ADU is very broad under the state of Florida. Is there limitations to people putting mobile homes on their yard, and then, you know, but the home has wheels, or, you know, it's able to be moved? That's still under the ADU umbrella, or does it have to be specifically metered and everything else? Like, what are the restrictions to anything accessory to the property?
So the city does not allow for mobile homes or RVs or any of those kinds of things. To anything that's on a chassis that can be moved is considered to be mobile or recreational in type. Those are not allowed in the city unless they're in a mobile home park or they're in an RV park. But to have one on your property, that would not be allowed at this point. Code would not allow for that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Deb has her hand raised.
Hi, thank you. Very informative. I appreciate this call. I guess I kind of went in this with two different ways. I live on the water in Hillsborough here, and my neighbor about 5 years ago built an accessory unit, 35 feet. I'm a single story home, and it overlooks my yard, and it is a little invasive, I believe. And now a new owner has it. It's a huge home in front, and then it's a 2-car garage with a 2-bedroom, 1-bath unit above it, and it's an Airbnb now. So, you know, from that standpoint, that original owner actually tried to split that lot. So is there going to be all these little units going up, and then people are going to be able to try to split their lots? Is that going to be allowed, or is that going to be something still, you know, oh, I put it too close to the property line, now I want an exception? Now you have all these homes that have these other accessory buildings, so now you're changing the look of the neighborhood. That's my first concern. I think some of my questions were answered. However, zoning, a lot of these units have already gone up in my neighborhood. And when we call the zoning, they're like, oh, we can't do anything about it. It's already there. So what are they going to do with some of these units that are already on these properties that aren't zoned for this, that, they're using as Airbnb or different things? Is there going to be some sort of something for zoning or something to say, hey, who's going to control this stuff when they're partying, 2 doors down from you? So I mean, I understand the housing. I get it. I'm for it, but I think that it should be a really careful look at what they're going to be used for. And do the people that currently don't have permits, are they going to go back to zoning and say, okay, here's my permit now? And do we get charged taxes? I mean, I don't know. I guess I kind of wanted to get on to see what was going on, so because there's a lot of this going around in my neighborhood, and it's really changing the look of the neighborhood. And I do feel a little concerned.
Well, so a couple of questions. The ones that have been built without permits are a violation. They're a zoning violation. And there's a building code violation.
But the city doesn't do anything. They just say, oh, well, we can't do anything. It's already been built. The big structure across from me, because we do live, that actually went to in front of the council because he wanted to split that property, and the city council said no, because all the neighbors around it said, no, we don't want a 2-car garage as a home in our neighborhood. So that one did not get split. However, the main house now uses the right of way as parking. So the right of way next to the home to the main house is actually the right of way. They're using that as the parking because. So I was listening kind of to the parking things, so people are using the right of way, and it's a narrow road as it is, and then the right of way, they're parking all their vehicles, there. So.
Well, if you, my contact information's in the beginning of the chat, LaShawn put in, if you want to email me those addresses, we can take a look at those.
That's not my purpose here. I mean, my purpose was kind of to listen, but I just think that, there's going to be more problems because they can't even keep up with what they're doing now to regulate it.
Well, I just want to comment on one thing. Airbnbs, the city is preempted by the state of Florida for regulating those. When that went into it, when the state preempted us, which was probably in 2011, 2012, the only thing that the state allowed us is you had something on the books for regulating purposes that could be enforced. So the only thing the city had on its books at the time was the definition of a dwelling unit, which is meant if it's an Airbnb should be rented. The time frame is 7 days, so it's 7 days. So if you rent it on the 1st, and then somebody you have when you rent it from the let's say October 1 to October 4th, you can't rent that out again until the seventh day after the 1st. So you can't rent that again until the 8th. I will say code enforcement or neighborhood enhancement does follow what's going on the Airbnb and the VRBO, whatever the other ones are called, web pages. They do look for people who are in violation. They try to address those as much as they can. That is an active process that code enforcement does go through. The city is very large. We're not a small town. So code enforcement does the best it can do. When people do complain, or we do get a complaint about something like that, we do respond to that, or we should be responding to that. Let me put it that way. So again, this is just, again, in public information workshop.
Okay.
Some of these are all these comments that we're getting, both in support of some of our changes and not in support of some of our changes are good. We'll be meeting again with city planning and us, along with, some of this will go forward to city council. We'll share with council some of the concerns that was expressed here. Again, workshops or public hearings, if y'all can show up during the day for those next Thursday, you can, and comment on some of this stuff, I believe. So, but does anybody have any other questions on the ADU issue? Do we still have?
Yes, we have
I
Courtney
do.
on the line.
The other question somebody brought up was the if you split it. So if you have let's say 800 square foot unit, can you put up 2 separate 400 square foot? So now you can have 4 people there.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Right now, I don't know if that's something we're going to allow or not. That's going to be a policy question. City council will have to make that decision on. I would lean towards the answer of no, if I'm like the king of zoning and I have what I say goes. But I'm not. I still respond to the administration of the city council. So it'll be up to city council on when that comes before them, how they're going to want to address that. Because the concern would be, I mean, if you have a big enough piece of property, you could have 6 ADUs on your property, perhaps each one 300 square feet. You know, that's the concern that would come out of this by allowance. That's why, to me, the limitation should just be one per zoning lot. But we'll see. I mean, again, we'll have to vet that through city council.
Okay, we have Courtney waiting online.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for hanging in. This is Courtney. Eric, first off, just want to say thank you. I feel like this has been something long overdue. We're looking for more density in these areas, and I feel like this is a great way to accomplish it. We have a ton of lots that are over, their standard size needed to meet these setbacks. But my question, a lot of these have already been answered. So when we're talking about ADUs, we're saying that it's 15% of the total lot size, and that's not going to be case by case. That's just going to be a set rule.
That's for accessory structures.
For accessory structures.
ADU is going to be still capped at 950.
It's still capped at 950. Okay. And then, so these accessory structures, what's the rear setback going to be on these if they're exceeding 15 feet? Are they going to need to hit primary?
Right now, as it was drafted, when we had this discussion a couple of weeks ago, it's still sitting at 3 feet.
Okay.
That still has to be examined. As a zoning regulator, I'm not comfortable with it at 3 feet, but that's something we can still look into.
Right. I still think that just coming off, just in my opinion, a lot of what I'm seeing in the neighborhoods, we have these extra deep lots that are super skinny. So trying to figure out different alternatives on how to utilize some of the land without completely eating up the entire backyard is just important. And I've seen that time and time again, and I'm sure you have seen that too. And it's kind of sad when I hear that none of these people have ever made it past the variance review board, let alone hearing with the city council. So super excited to see this one progress. What are we thinking and timeline of this? What's the next step here? Is it just going to go to vote, and then from there, what's the process?
Well, I think we followed that up. I think the schedule is listed towards the end.
Oh, okay.
So
Yes, and again, we'll review the timing and the scheduling for all the amendments. Yes.
Okay. Well, I won't hold you up. Thank you so much. I appreciate you guys, and have a good night, everybody.
Thank you. And Karen Romo, do you have a question?
Yes. I actually have an application, and that's a special use in process right now. So I didn't know, should I continue with it, or I know you said you're going to go over the timeline, so I guess it'll depend on the timeline of that. But the other big question I have, you said it will be allowed 15% of the lot size, but it's still going to max at 950, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so it doesn't matter, because I have a very large lot, which would allow 15%, would be like 1,600 square feet, but I'm still maxed at 950.
Correct.
Okay, and then and it's still maxed at 2 people, so it's okay. Yeah, so this is not a you don't have to be related to anybody in the ADU, so it doesn't matter who lives in which structure, because I want to live in the ADU, and my daughter and her family live in the main house. And that would be okay?
Now, you went for an ADU or an extended family residence?
Well, I have an application for an extended family, but I don't need that now if an ADU is just generally allowed, correct?
Well, this is the time frame. LaShawn just jumped forward a couple of slides. So we workshop next week. We go to the planning commission on the 7th. This is an ambitious schedule. We go to city council on December 1st for first reading of any of these code changes. If council agrees to move them forward after the workshop. So first reading, second reading, because we start going into the holiday season, might be in December, it might be in January. So, I mean, if you're already going through the EFR process for the extended family, I would recommend staying through that process. If that's approved and you meet the requirements of the code, and then council then does amend the ADU regulations, you can withdraw your special use. Even if it's already been approved, you withdraw that approval and convert to an ADU if that's something that council ends up saying, yes, we're good with what you're proposing.
Okay, it's just that with the extended family, they're limiting me to 899, and that's still I would have to appeal to city. It's really limited to 600.
Correct.
But I
Yeah,
was
that could be
asking for
council.
899, and they said I'd have to go to council. But with the ADU, I get 950. I'm not in a huge hurry. I can wait until January. I don't
Okay.
know. I guess I'll talk to you more about that maybe tomorrow. Call somebody.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. AJ has a question.
These changes. Thank you very much. I did have a question, just so basically, what's the difference between the accessory structure and the ADU in like plain man's terms? We know 950 is the ADU maximum square footage, but what defines the difference in both?
So an accessory structure is governed under 27290. That's just I'll call it a detached structure that's allowed on a property. That could be a shed, that could be a pool cabana, that could be an accessory dwelling unit. They're not interchangeable terms. The accessory structure is basically like the physical building that we're talking about, while the accessory dwelling unit is the actual use. Because an accessory dwelling unit could be in an accessory structure, or it could be in the main building. It doesn't have to be independent of the main structure.
Got you. It would be actually the usage of such.
Correct.
Okay. And this, I mean, would increase like revenues for the city, dealing with most likely if you're dealing with when you say separate meters, are you talking about separate meters dealing with all use services? So we're talking about separate gas, electric, and water. And would there be like an additional impact fee, or would it be fed from the same, sewer line? Can you elaborate on that at all?
I can touch on it. I can't elaborate on it because I'm not 100% sure. If you want to run electric, you'd have to get a separate, electrical permit and have a separate meter installed by TECO.
Correct.
For water, if you run off a separate water meter, utilities will charge you for that other meter and the cost of installing it. And, it may turn in, you may need to, run a separate line. You may need to increase the line that you have. Those are all issues that whoever is building these would have to address. It's not a panacea. The communities we've talked to, St. Pete, we talked to a couple of ones out in California. They've only seen an increase over a period of like 5 years. They've permitted maybe 100 of these. It's not it's not as if the city's going to say you can have an accessory dwelling units and people are going to go rush out and build these things.
Without a doubt, and they exist. It's just refreshing to be able to know that they can exist without one having to worry about code enforcement knocking on a door, or someone that's living there, not getting their deposit back and then calling the city because they left a mess and to get back at you for retribution. So it's just refreshing for business people and people that have places like this to be able to do it legally, finally, and have the endorsement of the city to do so, and be able to pay taxes and everything on there. And I find it's a wonderful change.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, and we have Gates. Gates has their hand up.
Yeah, I don't know if this was covered already, but was wondering why it's in certain districts and not in all of Tampa, particularly like South Tampa. Thank you.
Some of it was outgrowth of the conversations we had with the Planning Commission. New Tampa is its own separate entity in a sense, because most of that up there is all governed by individual plan developments. South Tampa, a good portion of South Tampa is in the CHHA. One of the discussions, and I mean, Ms. Zimmerman had brought it up in one of her emails or one of my discussions with her earlier, which was just allowing it in anywhere in the city, just not, if you're in the CHHA, you can't have one. The only problem is that the coastal high hazard area changes over the years. You can end up with a non-conforming ADU. That might be the approach we end up taking versus just saying Central Tampa, West Shore, and University Planning Districts. The other thought process we've had on this has been starting this off as a pilot program We're allowing it where it's allowed already, Seminole Heights and Lowry Park, expanding those areas where they're currently allowed, allowing them in East Tampa and West Tampa where they may already be, maybe not be legal, but they could become legal through this process. And then depending on how it goes, then allowing it in other parts of the city, moving it maybe further south at that time. There's been some discussions. That was part of the process of starting it as these planning districts as more of a pilot program kind of concept.
Okay, and that was the last one that we had with the hand raised. Is there anyone that we missed that has a question?
Yes.
I think we went down the list. Is it?
This is Susan. I thought there were a bunch of other people there.
Okay.
My first question is, these are legal now under a special use everywhere in the city, right?
No.
For
You're only legal in Seminole
accessory
Heights,
dwelling units?
are only allowed in Seminole Heights and in the Lowry Park neighborhood, this Lowry Park Central neighborhood.
But extended family units are allowed everywhere?
Correct, isn't it? Has that special use.
Okay, so my concern is, and I think they are needed. I think this goes too far. So I believe allowing them under this process with these changes in all of this area essentially doubles the density in whatever, half of the city, probably a third of the city. That seems to me to be a policy issue of the magnitude that should be considered in the comprehensive plan update, not by tweaking the zoning code to end around it. Essentially, we're doubling the density in a third or more of the city. And not to mention, to the comments of a few people ago, it has the potential of changing all of these neighborhoods, all the single family homes, into duplexes. When you add on to that we're allowing non-conforming buildings, I can see doing that in the extended family, under the extended family section, where if you have somebody in your family who needs a place to live and you're in a hurry because it's an emergency, that is not my dog. My dog has a way bigger bark. That I can see having that, if necessary, in an extended family situation, because there's also an annual review for that. And you can't charge a family person under that section of the code. Allowing these units to take place in non-conforming buildings that potentially neighbors have been waiting for years for them to be eliminated because they're non-conforming is, I think, absurd to allow that. For basically you're taking a unit that isn't conforming in the first place, and now you're helping them make money off of it. The no parking on units under a certain size, that is chaos, and certainly will affect single family neighborhoods. Then you're layering on top of this ability to increase accessory structure. So even though the unit is limited, you could have 3, 4, 10-car garage if you have a big enough lot, because it won't be based on the minimum lot size that's now based on how much property you own. So even though you have one unit, you could have a gigantic garage or workshop or studio or fill in the blank And I can say, as a former regulator responsible for code enforcement in several communities, including this one, you don't have enough code enforcement people to enforce the way this is written now. You know, the comment before about some of these requirements, you know, you can't make sure that these people are doing this. The city's too big, this area is too big. If there's a pilot program, that's one thing. If it's not so wide open, that's another thing. And again, my personal experience of, and I don't say this to be snarky, because I've literally been all the way to court on the side of a public agency trying to regulate and limit the quote unrelated individuals, because the way this is written, you could have unrelated individuals, but you could also have related individuals, and you could have 5 or 10 individuals. So I just say, I think this is a major policy issue, a major enforcement issue, and I hope you take it off of this list for this batch and rethink how to make it work, because it is important, but make it work so we don't throw the pendulum from one extreme to the other, because I think we are in the middle with a lot of people agreeing that it's needed, but if it goes wrong, then nobody will want it, and we'll ruin the whole concept. Thank you.
Why don't we move on to, I see Debbie
Okay.
hand up, and I see Brian Steele went off. I guess that's who BS is.
Oh, I'm still on. I'm still on.
Debbie.
Let's make this the last question, because we have one more publicly initiated one, and we have 3 privately initiated text amendments still that need to go through the same kind of vetted process that we're having with everyone. So Brian, do you want to take the last question on this issue? Or not? If you're speaking, Brian, we can't hear you. Let's just move on to the next slide, and if Brian can get on, we can go through. The next slide is has to do with West Tampa. This is an initiation this was initiated by the West Tampa CRA and the Citizens Advisory Committee for this stuff. What this has to do with is the driveways in the front. Right now, alley access is required. What this is proposing, when you can't utilize the alley to allow for access to single-family detached residential development from the public street, the maximum driveway width can only be 10 feet. So you don't get the typical, 18-foot or 20-foot wide driveway. And if you happen to have a lot that's very wide, 70 feet or wider, you can have a driveway up to 20 feet. Again, this does not include the flares that are required to make the turns. This is just the actual driveway where cars would be parking, so to speak. So this was a text amendment that was encouraged by the CRA for West Tampa. Anybody have any questions on that one?
Teresa Wilson has her hand raised.
That was from before. Sorry.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Teresa.
I'll remove that. Sorry.
We still have some with their hand. Okay. Karen Romo, do you have a question?
No, I already
West
asked,
Tampa.
but I think I need to take my hand down.
Yeah,
Okay.
you have to lower
Thank you,
your
Karen.
hand.
I'm
You have
sorry.
to lower your hand. Yeah.
All right, I'm done.
And Sandy Sanchez.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Did you have a
I'm a little, I'm sorry, Carlos, maybe you can explain it. What are you saying the CRA has agreed on? Alley access requirement is waived and vehicular access is provided from the front. Driveway shall be limited to single car width, applies to lots up to 70 cents in width. Okay. What is going to be the length of that driveway? I'm sorry, this is new to me and I'm on the West Tampa CAC.
This came out of city planning. I imagine they had discussions with the CAC.
What?
But this is talking strictly about driveway width, not driveway length, so to speak. So this is saying if you can't get access off of an alley and you're going to access from the public street, if your lot is 70 feet or less, then your driveway can only be, not including the flares, only 10 feet wide. So you don't get the big double driveways at the public street. So it still narrows it down and makes a smaller approach so you can still have on-street parking. You can still have pedestrians walking down the street without having a large driveway where cars are coming and going. The only time you get the larger driveway is if you're on a lot that's 70 feet or wider. In West Tampa, I don't believe there's that many or tons of lots that are going to be wider than 70 feet.
Okay, I know we've discussed ribbon driveways, and I understand what you're saying, but one of our concerns has always been the length of the driveways, because we want to make sure that there's enough room for a couple of cars to park even in that single car driveway. So I'm just a little confused. We have a meeting next Tuesday, and I guess we can talk about it again.
I see Carlos
think
is on the line and has his hand raised. If you wanted him, Sandy, to speak also.
Okay, I think there was a lot more to our discussion than this. That's all I'm gonna allude to. Thank you.
Is it my turn or is somebody else good ahead of me?
Carlos.
Yes.
Who's
Okay.
on hi, Carlos. Yes.
Hi. Yeah, we did discuss this with staff several times. We never really came up with a sure solution that we voted on. That code change that is proposed, is that in addition to what's already there, or is there also a change to the current code where it says shall be access to the back? Is that going to be changed or is that going to remain?
I'll defer to Matt if he's got the answer to that question from city planning.
We can't hear you, Matt.
Matt, we can't hear you. Where'd you go?
I guess oh, here we go. Okay, that's not her. I guess if it remains the way it is, the way we had changed it, where it's a shall, and then there's the design exception process where they actually get is waived, then they are limited to that, then okay, I see that. But if we are going to be just changing it to a may, then we have a very strong objection to that as part of the West Tampa CRA-CAC.
We have a meeting, like I said, next Tuesday evening. I'm sure we can talk some more about it, but this is nothing that we've really spoken about at presentations before. So I personally am a little surprised at it. So I hope this one definitely, until there's more information and the CRA, all the CAC agrees, we can't go further on this. We understand that there has to be an option to the alley. Okay, and this is possibly the answer to that option, but there's no clarity here, enough clarity here for us to move forward at this time.
I remember discussing this with Steven, and this was brought up, and we did go over it. We just never finalized our decision on it. So we would just like to touch base. Matt said he was going to get in contact with us, so that would.
Yeah. Hey, I'm not sure if you guys can hear me. This is Matt Pleasant. My mic is not working, and so I decided to run over to my colleague's desk and chime in. But we will connect with you on this change.
Okay. I mean, I'm all for smaller driveways. I just want to make sure that we don't change that shell to a main. That was my concern.
Okay, thank you, Carlos, and Sandy. And there is someone on with their hand raised. It just says Sanchez.
Sorry. Hi, my name is Sharika, but I jumped in a little bit late, and so I may have missed it. But with the ADUs that are, if it is going to be allowed, does that increase us with the property taxes due to the us adding those particular structures on, and whether or not impact fees would be placed on those when we are building them?
So just as a quick answer, taxes are determined by the property appraiser's office and the tax assessor. The city doesn't determine tax rates. We have been told that a accessory dwelling unit could trigger additional taxes because it's performing as an income producing property. But other than that, those are questions that would have to be answered by the property appraiser's office, like what the taxes would be, how much would your taxes go up and such like that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have Debbie Sommerman. Okay, Debbie, you have no questions on this item for West Tampa overlay? Looks like she put in the chat she did not, but she is muted. So I think that's all the hands we had raised. Do we have any other questions?
Okay, so thank you all for attending for this stuff. We're going to move on to, well, LaShawn already went over this portion of it. So I'm going to say thank you all for attending. I'm going to mute myself and shut my camera off, and I'll turn everything back over to LaShawn.
All right, thank you, Eric. And we'll go ahead and move to our portion of the presentation with the privately initiated text amendments. So our first request is a change to the East Tampa overlay. This request is a part of the January 2022 amendment cycle. This request is submitted from the East Tampa CRA and the East Tampa CAC. So this effort started several years ago, and the applicants will explain. This has been a process where they are looking to update the code, make some slight modifications on some areas, and create some standards within certain areas of the overlay code. But overall, there's two sections of the code which will be amended. One is 27240, and that contains the East Tampa overlay standards. And then the other section of the code to be amended is 27-156. And this just for information, this is the map of the East Tampa overlay district. So you can see this is the boundary, which is identified here in green. Which is bordered. You can see the interstate on the south and the west, which jogs over to 15th Street also. A little north of Hillsborough is the northern boundary, and then the eastern boundary jogs also to include certain areas within 56th Street. So in 27-156, part of the area of change is to clean up, and this is a move with the accessory dwelling unit, the group use that we have it in our use table. Another change is to allow the accessory dwelling units as a special use. This is for properties located within the East Tampa overlay boundaries. And the changes within the overlay are broken into residential and commercial changes. So for residential development, these are the areas of the code that are proposed for change, which the applicants will review with you, relating to the front setback, replacements for garages, carports, and then fencing also, and accessory structures. Those are the areas of the residential code which have been amended with this request. And then the proposed amendments for the non-residential uses, for the commercial uses, are listed here. They include the front yard placement, the building placement, minimum sidewalk standards, screening for solid waste, open space areas, rooftop equipment. This also touches upon accessory structures and parking standards and sign standards. So what I'm going to do now is turn it over to the applicant. I believe we have Kim Headland on the line. She's representing the East Tampa CRA, and we have on the line with us also Cedric McCray, who is the East Tampa CRA manager. So Karen, would you like to share your screen?
I think you've touched on all of the critical and big items that we've asked to be revised. This has been a 6-year process of committee meetings and public presentations and refinement. I can say that on the commercial side or the non-residential side, one of the biggest things that we were looking at is to the parking standards and to revise those. So some of our historically commercial corridors could remain that way, and that we could encourage some adaptive reuse of those existing commercial structures on those corridors. And then one of the biggest items for the residential side was the addition of the accessory dwelling unit and allowing that within East Tampa. I think everything else is fairly self-explanatory, and I'm sure Cedric's on the line and can add and help answer questions as well.
Okay, thank you, Kim. Cedric, did you have anything to add?
Good evening. No, I think you all have touched on every aspect that we've been discussing in recent months. As Ms. Headland shared, I had left the state for a while and thought that the overlay had been completed and came back, and we still were in a state of hold. So this is something that we're really excited about moving forward as we look to reimagine East Tampa and the CRA boundaries, and just the possibilities of making sure that things are uniform and in a certain form or fashion up to the residents that are currently living there and the business owners and their expectations. So we appreciate everyone's input and look forward to moving forward with the process.
Okay, thank you so much, Cedric. And what we'll do is let's open it up for questions and see if we have any. I see Debbie Zommerman has her hand raised. Debbie, do you have a question for us on the East Tampa overlay code?
I don't think she ever put her hand down.
Let's see if she answers. Oh, she's not there. Okay. All righty, Teresa Wilson. Teresa, do you have a question?
Yeah, sorry, I was muted. I think this looks great. I'm in VM Ybor, so really appreciate the efforts here. Just one thing I wanted to mention is about the chain link fences. I used to not like chain link fences at all, but I'm telling you, after this hurricane, the chain link fences are the ones that were able to withstand the storm. And if you look around, there's so many other types of fences that you know, the brand new beautiful vinyl fences and the wooden fences that all got knocked down. So I think we might want to reconsider that one, given, you know, given the propensity to be affected by hurricanes. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
And just to add also and provide clarification, the chain link fences would be prohibited as a new, if you were to construct one today. But if it exists, it is allowed to remain and repairs are allowed. But certainly have noted your feedback, Teresa. Thank you. And did we have any other questions? I don't see any other hands raised, but do we have any other questions on this particular request? Beverly?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. I believe it was in 2020 when John Dingfelder had brought to, I guess, the table about an exception to the PD rezoning requirement in East Tampa for lot splits on non-conforming lots of 5% or less in East Tampa overlay. Do you know if that's going to come up again to be considered?
I can't say if it's coming up again. I know that it was reported back to council when that direction was made by Councilman Dingfelder, and then it was not moved. There was no motion to take it further. So at this time, it is not.
Okay. Is there any way to resurrect that?
Council would initiate a motion for it. Right now, if we were to amend the code, it's only allowed publicly. No privately initiated requests are allowed in the code currently. So it would have to be at the direction of council to make a motion for that change. As it exists currently from the date of creation of the overlay, if a lot exists, then it's a lot that can be developed. But
Okay,
yes, that particular motion did not, it did not move any further.
Okay, and then just because I'm trying to get, I've got some things to do. I was going to save this to the end, but can you announce where this? You said it was being recorded. Is there going to be somewhere we can listen to this again and view the slides?
Yes, I'm actually going to post the video online on the city's webpage for our department. And what we'll do, everyone who's in attendance, we're going to send out the link to everyone. And once we complete it by tomorrow, we'll have that video posted.
Okay.
Tonight's meeting, yes. And that way you'll be able to go back and watch it. We will also post the PowerPoint online at the same location. So we have everyone who has registered to attend and we can provide that information for them.
Okay, I appreciate
I'm
that.
going to try to put it also in a chat before we're done.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Thank you. Okay, do we have any other questions?
So, real quick, so on future sessions like this, on workshops, we'd have to register for each workshop in order to attend, or once you're on the list, you automatically get the link sent out to you?
Yes, you would have to register. But what we have done, because you are required to register, what we do is we do take that last list of whoever registered and we just send it out to you automatically. So if you if you'd like to be on the list, we can certainly just automatically send an invite. Some people don't want it.
Okay, yeah, I definitely would like to be on the list because it was pretty hard for me to maneuver, trying to find this meeting and this link and trying to get to the calendar, just kind of learning how to maneuver through the website. So I did manage this time, but I definitely want to be at the one. Like I noticed it said there was one on the 27th that is coming up, another workshop, just to make sure that I am on those. I would really like that.
So this is a little different. So what we have today, what we are currently meeting on is our publicly initiated amendments, and this meeting is our public information meeting. So we're reviewing the public and private amendments. What is on the 27th is a city council meeting, and that's the city council workshop. So that is different, and you would register through the city clerk's website. if you want to participate or attend virtually, or you can attend in person. But that's city council and that's a different meeting. We don't
Okay,
schedule
all right,
that.
thank you.
Absolutely, yes, you're welcome. Okay, and so seeing no other questions, we'll go ahead and move on. Kim and Cedric, thank you so much for attending today. And our next
Judith, LaShawn, we can't hear you.
Okay, I'm sorry. Let me go back. So this is a privately initiated text amendment. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Thank you. So this request is an amendment to the Central Business District Periphery. This is a part of the January 2022 amendment cycle. The applicant is Tyler Hudson, but I believe we have Alex Shaler on the line. I'm not certain if Tyler is with us. But the request is to amend 3 sections of the zoning code. One is 27283.7, which is the off-street parking spaces. And the other is to amend 2 areas of the code, and that's the 27283, which is relating to loading spaces. And then the last change is within the landscape and natural resources area of the code, and that's the tree planting requirements. So this request, when we mentioned the CBD periphery, this is the Central Business District. This is the map of the periphery. So this area, which is identified in yellow, is the area which will be covered under this request. So any properties that fall within that boundary would be able to take advantage of this, the changes that are proposed. So for the parking standards, it would affect the multifamily residential parking ratios, which were at 1 space per unit. This removes the visitor parking requirement, allows for parking trade-offs and offsets, and it allows a single loading berth. It removes the requirement for the continuous maneuvering. And in the landscape section, this will allow the parcel area percentage for the green space requirements. And this provides clarification of the adjacent use for the buffer requirements. So that's a quick overview of the changes proposed. We have the applicants online, and I'd like to turn it over to the applicants and they can explain the request. So hi, Alex.
Hi,
Thank you
everyone.
so much.
Alex
Did you want to
Shaler.
share your screen, or are you?
No, I think you did a good job. I can just kind of give
Okay.
a brief overview, and I wanted to kind of provide a background of, where this originated and why we're proposing these specific amendments. So I'm Alex Shaler. I work with Gardner Brewer Hudson, Director of Entitlements for our law firm. And LaShawn did a good job touching on the different sections of code that we're proposing to amend, but this stems from, we have a lot of projects located in the CBD periphery, and the CBD periphery largely lives in the comprehensive plan. So our thought process here is trying to adjust some of these current code standards that are more so specific to suburbanized development, and tailor those for specific projects that are located in the CBD periphery, so that they more so mirror something like the CBD or Channelside, given how close a lot of these projects are to the urban core. So that's where this started. We've done a large amount of PDs in the CBD periphery. Most of them include the same 6 or 7 waivers that we usually present before council, related to parking, related to loading, related to green space. So like I said, in an effort to present a PD with less waivers, and as Eric had mentioned earlier, kind of eventually maybe even circumvent the PD process and get back to more Euclidean rezonings, we think that this is a little bit more appropriate for sites that are located blocks away from the city center.
Okay. All right. Thank you. And so with that, do we have any questions from anyone online? We have Nicole has raised her hand.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nicole Neugebauer. I'm a land use attorney over at Stearns Weaver. Just wanted to say that I'm in support of this application. I think that this would really clean up a lot of our applications because we do have, as Alice explained, so many waiver requests for projects that are in the periphery, but not necessarily in a CBD zoning district. And again, because the CBD periphery largely does live in the comprehensive plan, it's been confusing on the applicant side to figure out what standards really apply. Which then ends up with a lot of waivers at council. So the only suggestion I would make is potentially we could, instead of amending several sections, include a note in the CBD district standards that if the project is within the CBD periphery, those standards would also apply. But otherwise, I think this is a great amendment and would certainly be helpful for future applications for council. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nicole. And we have Sandy Sanchez has her hand raised. Sandy, do you have a question for us? Oh, okay, she's muted. Okay, try it now, Sandy. Sandy, can you hear us? Okay, try it again, Sandy. See if you unmute yourself if you're able to speak.
Okay, now can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, could you tell me what the west boundary is of the CBD? And the map is too small.
I put it in the chart. South Boulevard is the western boundary of the CBD.
What?
South Boulevard.
Gulf Boulevard?
South.
South Boulevard.
Well, you
Just
have
west
North
of
Boulevard in here.
I mean, I think it's, I mean, it's
the same street.
Right.
It's the same street.
Mhm.
Okay. So that means from North Boulevard to the river. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sandy. And do we have any other questions? And so for clarification also, this change, the amendments that are proposed would be a footnote in the table for the parking requirements. And so those are the code sections that are listed. So I know there was a comment earlier about maybe putting it within the CBD under their footnote. The CBD section would apply only to the properties within the CBD. And we kind of looked at that when it was first submitted and decided that this would be the best place to put it. So. All right. Well, I don't see any other questions.
I have one more thing,
Okay.
LaShawn.
Yes.
Okay. So when we say it goes to North Boulevard, I know this sounds like a stupid question, but to the east or the west side of North Boulevard, because here's the problem. We have all of West River being developed. We have that new complex of over 1,000 apartments. I don't think this is the time to be changing anything having to do with parking and loading and all that if they affect the area to the west of on the west side of North Boulevard. So I would definitely like clarity in that, because I want us to foresee the problems that we're going to have anyway with 1,000 new apartments. That's just in the new one that's going on between North Boulevard and Cass. Then we have West River that's going on also. We have a Publix on that corner. You know, if you start limiting all these all these things in that area, you're just going to cause more and more traffic problems and parking problems. So it's something that I definitely think it needs to be looked at. Thank you for the better picture, but it doesn't change what I'm trying to say. It's a question of looking at the future. We do know that that particular property has they've already begun applying for the PD and everything. So I just think we need to be distinct in the area if it's going to be east or west side of North Boulevard, because if it's on the west side, it's going to be critical to that community, to these changes. Thank you.
So Boulevard would be the boundary, so west of it would not apply. So Alex has the map up that actually has a close-up of the area. And Sandy, you can see if it's west of Boulevard, it would not apply. It has to be on the eastern. It has to be Boulevard or east.
Sean, I can't hear you.
So the map that Alex is showing, can you hear me? On the map Alex has on the screen, west of Boulevard would not apply. It's Boulevard is that boundary line, and it would just be the properties that are east of Boulevard.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. So do we have any other questions for Alex? Okay, I don't see any. Okay, well, thank you, Alex, for your presentation. And we'll move to our next private amendment. And I'll share my screen again. Okay, so our next amendment is another privately initiated amendment. This is our last amendment for this evening. This is a part of the January 2022 amendment cycle, and this is a request to create an overlay for Tampa Heights. So this would contain Tampa Heights Overlay District Design Standards. This would include standards for residential properties, in addition to standards for commercial and mixed-use properties. So the applicant is Brian Seal, representing this request. And just for the benefit of the public online, this is the boundary for Tampa Heights. You can see the northern boundary is MLK. The western boundary is Boulevard. This really cuts out the current Heights project boundary, which is its own PDA with its own design standards, set of standards. And then you have the interstate, which borders on the east and the south. Any properties that are located within the historic district would not apply. These standards would not apply to those properties. So what I'd like to do now is turn it over to Brian Seal. I believe Brian is on the line. And Brian, would you like to share your screen? We can't hear you right now. Can't hear you. Still can't hear you right now.
Can you hear me now?
Now we can hear you. Yes, there we go.
I was having trouble at the beginning with Eric trying to chime in. So great. Let me jump in here then and do a quick screen share. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for hanging in there tonight until the end of the evening. Hopefully everybody can see my screen here. And I'm excited tonight to present the Tampa Heights Overlay Code Amendment. One thing I do want to clarify for the record, this is not a personal code amendment. While my name is attached to it on the application, I'm the president of the Tampa Heights Civic Association, and this proposed overlay code is a fully written and endorsed effort of the Tampa Heights Civic Association as a group, not me individually. I want to just give a very brief history of the effort. The main reason that you're seeing this and we're talking about it tonight is because we're following up on a promise that the city had made under a previous administration to create a form-based code overlay for Tampa Heights following the creation of Seminole Heights. And because of various resource issues and political issues, that did not happen. And so in 2019, our group took it upon ourselves to write that code. While we wish it could be more robust and comprehensive, we're looking at this like an incremental approach. I myself agree with a lot of the speakers earlier tonight in that the city does need an overhaul of the zoning code. I don't think there's too many folks internally and externally in the city that disagree with that. I think we got to give a lot of grace to LaShawn and Eric and other staff because they're doing what they're asked to do, which is improve the code incrementally. But I think for us on the call, this is my own editorial aside, we need to continue encouraging our elected officials to fund this, fund more staff, fund consultants, fund the overhaul itself, because I think we're just going to have to keep chipping away at this as best we can incrementally until we get there. But that is the purpose of this tonight. And really, what are we trying to accomplish? Why are we doing this? Well, Tampa Heights is the oldest neighborhood in Tampa outside of downtown with its own unique character. It's an urban village, is classified by the comp plan. And because we are outside of our historic district, just the general city code, it's not appropriate to the character and urban form of the neighborhood and what we're seeing. So some of the key things we're trying to accomplish: number one, affordability. Here's some information you see on rental affordability. A lot of people criticize California. It's a regular punching bag, but just look at this. We are equally as unaffordable as California when you compare it as a percentage of gross income. So that's one thing that we hope we're at least going to start chipping away at with this overlay district. Home prices as well. So for owner-occupied housing, Tampa Bay, in this chart, you'll see that it's from March 2022, where it was a 34.8% year-over-year increase from March, a little bit, but it's still up almost 32% year-over-year in July. But Tampa Heights, the most recent information that I could find, was 49% year-over-year. So we're outpacing the city here and the region. And so it's important that we get something done aimed at affordability. The other key point is safety. Some of you may have seen this before, but it's one of the top 10 most dangerous places for pedestrians and bicyclists. Continually, we're seeing this in the headlines too much. Tampa Heights should be the most walkable neighborhood in Tampa, and it's not there yet. And why is that? I want to just show you part of the reason why we're doing this is look at our peer cities here. In the center, in this yellow and blue, you'll see from
Brian,
the
your
Tampa Bay
slide isn't
partnerships.
moving.
Oh,
Let me
have you
see.
got it there?
No, it's still showing the first slide.
Okay.
There we go. There we go.
Okay. Did it catch up to the walk score?
Walkability, our peers. Yep. Okay,
Great.
thank you. Sorry.
Sure. No, that's fine. So here's the regional competitiveness report from the Tampa Bay Partnership, showing how poorly we rank in comparison to the 19 other cities that we compete against. But here's Tampa Heights in the inset. If you look next to that, walk score is 63% for downtown Tampa Heights, and I think that captures Harbor Island because you have to do it by zip code. But look at the other zip codes that surround our competitor cities of Atlanta, Nashville, Miami, Charlotte, even St. Petersburg across the bay are all more walkable than we are. How do you get there? You get there through good urban design. And so that's what we're trying to help accomplish. It's a safety issue. It's a quality of life and a health issue if people can walk more. So here's a summary of our changes. Again, it's driven by affordable a walkable and transit supportive urban design. We're trying to target some key things: preserving green space and on-street parking through site layout regulation, promoting vehicle access via the alleys, encouraging front porches, which are beneficial to the community and common in Tampa Heights, incentivizing accessory dwelling units, something that's already been talked quite a bit about tonight, and relaxed commercial parking minimums to spur more commercial denser development on our corridors. We've been working obviously with LaShawn and city staff on this, and they've been very helpful in these efforts. But this isn't the only thing. Like I mentioned, we are trying to achieve incremental improvement here. We want to accomplish that through this PIDA, then get an updated neighborhood plan. Our current neighborhood plan was passed 20 years ago and guides what our civic association does and the goals and the urban design that we seek to steward. But we need an update to that for our current generation. And then we want to follow that with a permanent, robust overlay, like regulating the entire neighborhood based on Hart's TOD study that they did that concluded earlier this year. And some of those provisions are contained within this code. LaShawn, one thing I think we might want to step back and clarify. I think we still have some competing understanding of the exact street by street boundaries. I know that this map's old, we've excluded Blake as well as the Heights, but I think your east-west line over here went further north of Palm. We can handle that off the call if we need to, but my understanding is it only goes up to Palm there and then
Yes,
back
we do
down
need to
Tampa
modify
Street.
slightly.
Okay.
You're correct. Yes.
Okay.
We do need
And
to
then
modify it, then we'll put it online to
okay,
post it.
yep. And then I think we need to continue a conversation because there are some folks in our historic district that would like some of the benefits of this code amendment to spur redevelopment as well as helping sharpen their regulation over there. So that's sort of a continued conversation. Again, part of it's been that we've been asked not to commingle this with the historic district standards, but I'd like to just reiterate that folks over in that section of the neighborhood, it's approximately third of Tampa Heights, are asking how we can work on some of this. So ADUs, a topic of discussion tonight, but a few facts I wanted to point out is that 28% of the American population is single people living alone, yet 90% of our residential units are 2 or more bedrooms. So there's just a mismatch nationally with the housing stock. In 2019, we were already short for 29,000, beds for heads before the whole pandemic relocation wave really hit us here. And so there's a lot of benefits to looking at ADUs. And the reason that we're pursuing this separate from the cities overall is, again, the points of good questions and debate tonight are that, that effort may not come as quickly or come to fruition in that form, but Tampa Heights would like this, and we would like to move ahead, being the next neighborhood that strongly welcomes ADUs into our neighborhood. That's because we think they're compatible to Tampa Heights. Here's examples from various quadrants of our neighborhood where you can kind of peer and see that there's a lot of detached accessory dwelling units. Here's a lot split that has 2 of them in the back of that property. And there's probably countless others that are attached ADUs that are just not easy to figure out or picture, but we want to bring those into the light and encourage them as an affordable renting option to really offset the cost of living increase in Tampa Heights and keep some of our diversity of incomes and folks here in Tampa Heights. So the code mechanisms that we're really pursuing are to allow those ADUs by right and increase the height to allow them over detached garages, which again follows the historic precedent set in the neighborhood. We also want to encourage that new development uses our existing alley network. We have an extensive alley network. And if it can't be improved though, or there's some other extenuating circumstance why they can't, we want to make room for allowance that there can be curb cuts. There's a historic precedent for that as well. But what we're seeing in the neighborhood is an excessive number of curb cuts and suburban style planning that is really just killing walkability. It's killing on-street parking. It's really eating up necessary green space and shade tree space that we don't need to lose in a neighborhood that was laid out and built out between 1880 and the mid 1920s on a unique network of alleys that provide alternatives that we don't have to live in a car dominated way. So just to give a couple examples of that so you can see what I'm talking about, is you see, again, most of these are newer townhomes, which are in, most of these were already zoned multifamily, which our board welcomes density. Density is a great thing. It's how you design that density that matters. And here you're losing entire front yards. In some of these, you're losing opportunities to plant shade trees. All of these properties have alley access that do not utilize them to their maximum potential. And so this is where we believe the private sector needs guidance on this, because some of these same actors that develop this outside of the historic district have no problem complying with a historic district, which would never allow this type of urban design process through the ARC. And there's this historic precedent. Here's the compatible examples where you see a single width driveway under portico. You see several newer, obviously newer type developments that utilize their alley, that preserve. Look at all that lawn space, those shade trees, the built out sidewalks, which thankfully the city closed the loophole in. The bottom center is a historic 100-year-old apartment building. There's room for all types of multifamily and single family here that adhere to good walkable urban design. And that's what we want to encourage through this PIDA. Our other problem we're trying to tackle is the lack of commercial development on our main corridors. Outside of the Armature Works area and a little bit on Franklin Street, there's been very little commercial development. And part of that is because so much is dominated by vacant lots and surface parking. And so part of the problem is here is that we do have a fairly walkable neighborhood, and part of the barrier to this, and what Hart found in that TOD study, is that we need a drastic drop in parking minimums. Now, that doesn't mean that there's going to be no parking, but removing and lowering that minimum for many properties allows the business to decide how much parking they need to function and utilize other shared parking opportunities and on-street parking. So the code mechanisms we propose for that are for dropping the commercial parking minimums to 1 space per 2,500 for structures under 1,500 square feet. They're not going to be required to provide any off-street parking. And so what you get is if folks are familiar with Lee's Grocery, one of the most popular craft beer and pizza places in Tampa Heights and in the city, had to jump through loopholes. They have no off-street parking. That's great, like walkable scale commercial neighborhood property, and we need more of that. And it's not happening because people just can't go through the process of getting the waivers or the rezonings in order to activate some of these underutilized properties. So a similar thing we're doing in dropping some of the other parking minimums on Franklin Street. Part of that incentive is to allow historic properties, if they are adaptively reused, to drop their parking minimums, and then to allow the substitution of bike spaces for off-street parking as well. Just wanted to touch that there are, throughout our articles of incorporation and that 2003 Tampa Heights Community Plan, which was officially adopted by City Council, all of these things are listed in there in terms of supporting that good urban design and urban development pattern. So we're not just coming out of left field with this. This is part of the plan that we're supposed to steward for Tampa Heights. It's also throughout the comprehensive plan. Here's all sorts of citations that deal with compatibility, that deal with our historic neighborhoods, that deal with accessory dwelling units, as well as conflict with pedestrians, walkable development. And then there's federal policy behind this that goes even higher as to why this is proper, urban design. We certainly put in the time researching this through different organizations and think tanks like the American Planning Association and Congress for New Urbanism, Strong Towns, other groups that put a lot of energy into thinking about how to build out historic urban neighborhoods and how to build pedestrian friendly places that are, again, safe and affordable. Part of that affordability is that we want to give people the option to not have to own a car or two cars and other ways to get around. And so with that, I'll end my presentation and just say that full details are posted on our website, as well as a petition of support. Everyone is free to contact us at any time with questions or ideas. And then tomorrow night at 6:30 p.m. at our community center at 2005 North Lamar Avenue, we are hosting a special forum on the overlay. This is something that we have, again, worked on for 3 years at the Civic Association. It's been publicly noticed by us and publicly distributed for over a year and a half, discussed at every one of our monthly meetings. But as we go to the Planning Commission on November 7th, we want to make sure that nobody's caught off guard. So we're hosting that special meeting for this tomorrow. And with that, thank you for the time, LaShawn.
Absolutely. Thank you, Brian. And just for the benefit of everyone on the